in every enterprise and every business enterprise. So you remove charity and other type of so-called non-profit. It's a poor choice of the word non-profit activity. But in all business enterprise, you have to have these three accounts. And then you have to know how the money is allocated or distributed through these three accounts. And without that, you don't understand what's going on. And that is the answer to the paradox of interest problem, because it just washes together the income, it doesn't separate out the managerial part, and it's just an oversimplification to say that there is this bidding for capital goods and the entrepreneur will get revenue over a number of years, the life of the capital goods, and then there is this discrepancy. Because investment is a meaningless word unless you fill it with content. When you separate the role of the capitalist, the entrepreneur, and the manager. And of course, as time goes, there could be different combinations. These two roles could be united, or those two, or all three. Or there could be several managers and so on. Usually there's only one entrepreneur. But let's not go into this. So this is, I thought it was so important that I introduced a name for it. Triple entry revenue accounting. No question. Well, please ask a question, please. I'm so anxious to hear.
Rudy?
Would it be correct to say that the reason the return on the machine never goes to that level is because there's room for the entrepreneur and the manager, and the rest is the capital? So the interest rate it can only be that high as the capital investment, but you must leave enough profit above and beyond that to cover the two other accounts, the profit account and the manager account. And if there's no profit, why do it? And if you can't pay a manager, then,
Well, you don't even know whether the enterprise has profits or not. Unless you introduce these three players and the three accounts which are involved, there is no way to know. You are in the dark. And when you are in the dark, you are likely to make mistakes. So to avoid that, at the very minimum, you have to identify these three persons or roles and the three different accounts. And the flow of money, the revenues come in, and we always consider after depreciation. I mean, if we bring in depreciation, it would make the picture far more complicated. But I thought that I simplify things, and I just assume when I say revenue, it always means net revenue, it always means revenue after depreciation. So that it means in practice that the capital goods you have never wear out. They live forever. Why? Because every quarter, say, you put in money into this depreciation account to take care of the day where you have to renew it. This is too old or obsolete. You have to. But there's no need for making the picture as complicated as that, because what we think is that this lives forever. Why? Because we renew it, we inject the elixir to make it immortal. The piece of, we know it's not, but we make it so with the depreciation account. And if this is done, then I think the whole problem of paradox of interest can be disposed of by saying triple entry revenue accounting. Now, more? Yes.
Professor, are you advocating a separate set of accounts?
A separate?
A separate set of accounts, because you have to continue your double entry accounting for, cash flow, assets, liabilities, and so forth, so your triple entry revenue accounting, are you advocating that to be executed as an aside to the existing accounting?
Yes, very much so, and I see this is not the latest version. The very latest version has an extra paragraph on how I borrow this word from common use, corporate governance. Corporate governance. I don't know if this suggests anything to you, but the idea is that in a very complex corporate structure, you find, of course, the bondholding department, the treasurer, and then you find the entrepreneur, and you find the manager, you see. So it's very clear that the manager is subordinate. And who is the entrepreneur in a complex corporation with lots of millions of shares and shareholders and so on? Well, the original idea was that the shareholders have an annual meeting where they gather, and the shareholders have votes, but not one man, one vote, but one share, one vote. So if you own 1,000,000 shares, you have 1,000,000 votes, whereas the other guy who owns one share has only one vote. But this doesn't sound very democratic, does it? But in business, it's not these ideals which count, but hard cash. So you have to make profit, you see. Anyhow, so who is the entrepreneur? It's not one man here, but the community of the shareholders. And they meet every year, once, maybe twice, but that's not important. The important thing is that they elect the directors of the corporation.
5 minutes. 5 minutes. 5 minutes to the coffee break.
Okay. So, all right. I just finish by saying that there is a distortion, because obviously the manager or the management, several managers, are subordinate. Just like in the three-man case, the manager can be fired, right? And the entrepreneur will hire a new one because he's dissatisfied with the performance of the person. Now, ideally in the corporate governance, this should be exactly the same. The directors could fire the managers, all of them, or one of them, or several of them, but they are the boss. Now this has been completely distorted, and what you find is that the managers take over the power. They got the upper hand, and the entrepreneurs become subordinate. you see, because they introduced all kinds of things, class A shares, class B shares, and so we don't go into that. But it's a complete distortion. So what an individual shareholder can do is vote with his or her feet, which means sell the share. That's the only recourse, because the idea of firing management is just unheard of. Although sometimes you hear a revolt of the shareholders, but this is not the same. So I guess we should, and we have 15 minutes?
15, back in 15 minutes.
Okay. It picked up a little bit at the end, but it got a rather slow start. So if we have this type of discussion again, I hope you will be more active. But I am by and large very satisfied.
Professor's going to move on to the next subject, the title of which is Cutting the Gordian Knot. So over to Professor.
Thank you. This is extra, so it's not really in the course. It's unannounced special, using the TV jargon of the American television industry. Kind of dessert, kind of diversion, if you like. Now, what I suggest to do is that I start now, and we have about 15 minutes to 12, so we take the break at 12, and when we come back at 2:30, I just continue, rather than going after 12. So there will be no question period until after we come back. I already said a few words about the city of Gordium, the city of Gordian. This is an ancient mythological story which was played out in Phrygia. Could you write this down? Phrygia. Phrygia. After the R, there's an R. No? Phrygia. No, that's okay. Yeah.
I was trying to spell it in Greek.
This was an ancient kingdom in Anatolia. Now it's present-day Turkey, and it was near Hellespont, where they could cross over from this part of Anatolia to the Asian part. And the mythological story is about a sorcerer. It's a female, which is perhaps not the right word, say a good type of witch, witch with goodwill. So this beautiful sorcerer cast an eye on the plowman, peasant, cultivating land. Very handsome, but poor at the same time. And suggested to him that she can make him the king of the land, the king of Phrygia. And then the man was ready with the answer. Well, if you do, can I in return marry you and make you a queen? So I leave the love story part out. You can read it up, find it on the internet or anywhere. And the deal was that he will take his wagon and drive to the capital city. And when he arrives, people will welcome him and immediately make him the king. Phrygia at the moment didn't have a king and didn't know what to do to get one, so that's all he had to do. Board his wagon and drive to the capital. The name of this man was Gordius. So that's what happened, but in the meantime the sorcerer went ahead and told the people who lived in the capital city that when this wagon arrives, the man who will descend from the wagon is going to be their new king. And the inhabitants of the capital city believed this. They knew this sorcerer, they liked her, and followed her word blindly. So when he arrived, got off the wagon, they welcomed, "Hail the new king!" And they had the king. And the city was renamed after the name of the king. The king was Gordius, and the city was renamed Gordium. And big flourishing followed. They built a brand new temple for the god Zeus, chief of the Olympian gods, and to commemorate the event of the elevation of a simple plowman, that's what he was, very simple plowman, was elevated to the king of a country, Phrygia. To commemorate this, the wagon with which he arrived had a pole, and the pole was tied to one of the pillars of the temple of Zeus, and it was an intricate tie, and the challenge was to untie it. And it was apparently very difficult because for quite a number of years people came, because the sorcerer also said that whoever can untie that knot will be the master of the world. So many people tried and no one succeeded. And then there was a longer period of time until Alexander the Great came around. He was on his move from his native Macedonia to Asia. He wanted to conquer, in particular, Persia and really the rest of the known world. And they knew about Asia and beyond Persia. So there he came with his army, heard about the story of the Gordian knot and the challenge that if you want to conquer the world, which in this case meant conquering Asia, then you better prove yourself by untying the knot of Gordian, the Gordian knot. So there he went, Alexander the Great, took a look, and he saw that this was complicated, and he said, well, I'm a soldier, I know what to do, and he took his sword and cut the Gordian knot, which after all fulfilled the challenge that the Gordian knot has to be untied. Rather unusual way of untying, but there it was. And then he went on and conquered the rest of the known Asia. Well, I'm not following the story, of course. It's very interesting what happened after and how he died and how the empire fell apart. So, but ever since this event, the challenge is when there is a challenge, very often they refer to the Gordian knot and they say he solved the Gordian, or he untied the Gordian knot, which means there's a high challenge and an unusual way of solving that or answering that challenge is very often being referred to as cutting the Gordian knot. So that's the story. I stopped my storytelling role here and continue with something which is very, very serious, and I want to alert you to the problem, which is like the Gordian knot, which for hundreds of years nobody could untie, but actually there is a way, an unexpected, an unusual way, which the world is ignoring, and my suggestion is that that's what we should do. So I'm just introducing this, and then we break up, and after I continue. The problem, our Gordian knot, which is staring us in the face at this stage in the world, is, and I'm very serious, I'm almost don't find the proper words to shake you up and shake everybody up who's willing to listen, that the world's monetary system as it is now is dysfunctional already. It's just being hidden, being covered up. And parts of this are as follows. The world's banking system is insolvent. They haven't got capital, or they are undercapitalized. And this is covered up by the governments allowing the banks to write fancy values on their assets. But they are by no means market values. The assets could not be liquidated. So in any kind of a run, this would become obvious that the banks are running on empty, as in America say, that you are running a car with an empty tank. That's what the banks are doing by grace of the government, which allows them to overstate the value of their assets and understate the value of their liabilities. It's a conspiracy. Shouldn't happen. There should be independent bank inspectors who would just put those or close those banks which are undercapitalized. But actually the case is worse than that. The very biggest banks are actually have zero capital. That's very serious. It's only a matter, and it won't cure itself, because the banks are not able to generate enough business and profitable business to recover. In fact, every day they get behind. So it's just a matter of time. And we are not talking about years. We are talking about months, perhaps, before another crisis of the type of 2008 will occur, which will be worse than 2008. Whether it will be the end of the monetary system, as we know it, is not a foregone conclusion. But the underlying economy is also very weak. I don't know what happened in the stock market yesterday.
Yesterday was Saturday.
It was?
Yeah, it was closed yesterday.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
It fell last week quite heavily, though.
But the last trading day was
Friday. The indices they're down about 1.5%. That kind of.
And that followed previous fall. So it doesn't look good. But even if it recovers and so on, it's just limping along. It's just very weak. So, I mean, banks normally, of course, prosper when the underlying economy is prospering. And conversely, if the underlying economy is weak, then the banks cannot hope to recover. So I don't want to prognosticate and prophecy here. I'm not an oracle, but after any serious analysis, you have to come to the conclusion that the international monetary system is at the end of the rope. And it's a dollar system. Now, the rumors say, but I would give some credit to these rumors, but they say that, of course, the source of the problem is the United States. But they have enough strings to pull that convey the image, project the image that really the trouble is in Europe, because the euro is an artificial currency and it was misconceived and it never had a chance to function because the individual central banks of these countries in Europe, which are part of the monetary system, such as Greece, for example, the central bank normally would devalue the currency and meet the crisis that way, hoping that the devalued currency would cut the imports of the country and promote exports, which is a foolish theory, but I'm not going to talk about this here. And therefore, to cover up the problem which is right there in America, they pull various strings and make it more difficult for the European countries to meet their obligations, and they say, you see, that's where the problem is. The euro, it's not flexible. They should, if they had the flexibility, then the problem wouldn't arise. So it's 12 o'clock. I'm going to adjourn here and continue and explain the further implications. Very bleak situation, but there is a hope that somebody could come and untie the Gordian knot. Well, thank you very much, and we'll continue at 2:30.
Thanks very much, Professor.